Good evening. It's still the same day. Pastor Barbara, aka Preacher with Parrots. This is the second video in this evening's Bible study. The reason I'm making it as a separate video is that I already have a series on homosexuality and the Bible, and a couple of other places where I make other comments on the same topic. Just as last week when we studied Melchizedek, and in Genesis, where we're reading, our Bible study has taken us verse by verse, chapter by chapter there. We had only a few verses about Melchizedek in Genesis, but then mentioned in Psalms and Matthew, but a great deal more in the New Testament in the book of Hebrews. And the same with our topic tonight, the destruction of Sodom. Because there's something that has occurred to me during my preparation for tonight's lesson that has not occurred to me in the past the same way that it has now. I want to mention it. We left with the end of, in our previous video, at the end of chapter 18. We're now in chapter 19. And Abraham has made an arrangement with God. If there are 10 righteous people, Sodom will not be destroyed. During our ending conversation, before I closed our live study, somebody asked me if I was sure that the sin they were talking about was homosexuality. And to what degree it was rampant or there a little bit. Remember, Sodom would not have been destroyed if there had been 10 righteous people in the whole city. The two angels entered Sodom in the evening as Lot was sitting at Sodom's gate. A lot of what we read in the Old Testament, there was no television, there was no internet. If you wanted to go where things were happening, especially the men, you went to the gate of the city. Lot, Abraham's nephew, he pitched his tent where he could sit in his tent door and look at Sodom. And pretty soon, he's sitting at the gate in the city of Sodom. And Lot was there, and he saw these two angels. Didn't know they were angels, I'm sure. Come in. And just as Melchizedek had been hospitable, and his father Abraham, to the three men who came, he was hospitable. Lot is equally hospitable when he sees these two that he had never seen before. And he bowed his face to the ground and he said, "My lords, turn aside from your servant's house, wash your feet and spend the night, and then you can get up early in the morning and go on your way. We'll make you comfortable, we'll feed you, we'll give you a place to stay, and then tomorrow you go on your way." No, they said, "We would rather spend the night in the square, out in the open, where we're not with guests of one person as opposed to others." But he urged them so strongly that they followed him and went to his house. He prepared a feast and baked unleavened bread for them, and they ate. Just before they went to bed, the men of the city of Sodom, both young and old. Now remember, Sodom would not be destroyed if there were 10 righteous men. But the men of the city of Sodom, young and old, the whole population surrounded the house where the two men have just arrived. And they called out to Lot, and they said, "Where are the men that came to your house tonight? Send them out so we can have sex with them." Now, I've been reading from Holman's Christian Standard Bible. This said, the men that are in your house, this is a whole town, young men, old men, surrounded the house. According to this translation, send them out so we can have sex with them. That's pretty explicit. I don't think anybody viewing this can't bring up a mental picture of what they're talking about. But let's go to the King James Version. This is why I bring out a lot of versions, a lot of translations, sometimes even in other languages. This says in chapter 19:5, this is King James. "And they called unto Lot and said unto him, Where are the men which came to thee last night? Bring them out to us that we may know them." Now in the King James Version, in the beginning of Genesis, it says that Adam knew his wife and they had a child. That's the way it's worded in the King James Version in the 1600s. Let's look at the New American Standard Bible, 19:5. "And they called to Lot and said to them, Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may have relations with them." Stronger than know them, not as strong as we want to have sex with them. Now I've got a Catholic version here. This happens to be the Catholic Pastoral edition. "They had not yet gone to bed when the men from the town surrounded the house. They were the men of Sodom, young and old, the entire population. They called Lot and said to him, Where are the men who arrived here tonight? Send them out so that we may have sex with them." I don't think I could say it any more clearly using medical terms, any term. If you don't understand what they're talking about, then you need to have another talk with your mom or your dad about the birds and the bees. This is what they're talking about. Men with men having sex. This last one I'm going to read from is 4 versions in one. One is not even a translation, it's just commentary. New International Version. Before they'd gone to bed, all the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. They called to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we can have sex with them." New Living Translation, one of the more updated modern versions. But they insisted. So at last they went home with him, prepared a feast for them. Let's see. "Where are the men who came to spend the night with you? Bring them out to us so we can have sex with them." New King James Version. This is still King James, which is, we want to know them, but they add the word carnally, fleshly, earthly, to add meaning. "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may know them carnally." I don't think there's any question in anybody's mind what they're talking about. Now, Lot went out and shut the door behind him. The angels are inside. Lot goes out, shuts the door, and he said, "Don't do this evil, my brothers." Now, this is not the only time in the Bible that homosexuality is mentioned, and the offer of virgins is made. Somehow, people in different places and different times, wrong is wrong, sin is sin, but the thought of offering them virgins might be more pleasurable than just other women. And he said, "Don't do this. I've got 2 daughters who haven't had sexual relations with a man." Most versions refer to it as virgins. "I'll bring them out to you. You can do whatever you want to them." In one case, they actually kill, abuse, and misuse her until she's found dead at the doorstep the next morning. But getting back to this case of Sodom. "Don't do anything to these men because they've come under the protection of my roof. They're my guests. I have responsibility for them. Get out of the way," they said, adding, "This one came in here as a foreigner, but he's acting like a judge. Now we'll do more harm to you than to them." We're talking about Lot. They put pressure on Lot and came up to break down the door. This is what the angels, who they perceived to be men, angels do not marry. Angels do not reproduce. They were created, they were not born. And they have never died. The angels that were created at the very beginning, before men were created, are still alive. Now, a third of them fell into sin at the rebellion led by Lucifer, and we call them demons. They are still angels. They are fallen angels. They put pressure on Lot to break down the door. But the angels, they thought they were men. Angels don't procreate. I can't say it more clearly. The angels struck down the men who were at the door of the house, both young and old. How did they manage it? With a blinding light, so that they were unable to find the door. They were all struck blind and they couldn't even find the door, let alone get in. Then the angel said to Lot, do you have anyone here, a son-in-law, your sons, your daughters, or anybody in the city who belongs to you? Get them out of this place, for we are about to destroy this place because the outcry against its people is great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. It is almost what was said when the sons of angels went into the daughters of men, and we're talking about the Nephilim that had pretty much destroyed things before God said, it is so bad, it cannot continue this way. And he had a talk with Noah, and Noah began building the ark because that was God's choice for getting rid of the sin of that day and starting over. And Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-laws who were going to marry his daughters. He had 2 virgin daughters, but they were not yet married. And he said to them, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city. But the sons-in-law thought he was joking. And at the crack of dawn, the angels urged Lot on, get up, take your wife, your daughters who are with you, or you will be swept away. And we know, I want to get on with something else now, so I'll end here. We know that Sodom was destroyed. Now, the point I want to make tonight that I have never made, it just never occurred to me, as it did when I was preparing for this week's lesson, that this particular sin that God finds so disturbing happens in 3 different times and occasions. We often think of the Old Testament as being the law, and the New Testament as being God's will interpreted under or during a time of grace. But we have a 3rd time in tonight's story. What I just read to you was before the law. The dealing of Abraham with Melchizedek was before the law of Moses. Abraham, Isaac is not born. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel. After they go to Egypt, and they are enslaved for a little over 400 years. And then they come out in the book of Genesis around chapter 19, 20, 21, is when Moses goes up to Mount Sinai and receives the law. But here in Genesis 19, It was before the law. Before the law was given, God was displeased with the sin of homosexuality. And let me explain. Homosexuality is a preference. A person is a homosexual if they have a preference to be with the same gender. The preference is not a sin any more than being tempted means sinning. Jesus was tempted. He did not sin. A person who has a preference and does not act on that preference has not sinned. In a previous series that I mentioned an occasion when in prison, for an example, heterosexual men who have wives and children at home but find themselves only in the presence of men practice homosexuality, but they are not homosexuals. But yes, they do sin. It is not the preference. It is not the temptation. It is the act. So let me go to the book of Exodus, and we get this law in 18 and 20. The same thing that God finds objectionable before the law. This is what it reads like during the law. And I thought I had the Bible that I had marked. And I don't, because I should be in Leviticus. Sorry about that. Here we go. Leviticus 18:22. You are not to sleep with a man as with a woman. It's detestable. How detestable? Let me read some other things you're not to do. You're not to have sexual intercourse with an animal. Or have a woman to have sex with an animal. That's the 18th chapter of Leviticus. Let's go now to 20, verse 13. If a man sleeps with a man as with a woman, they have both committed an abomination. They must be put to death. Their blood is on their hands. This is God's